Hi everyone, welcome. I've got my glove on, I've already got the tray up here on the bench, all set to go. Before we get started, I figured I'd really quick share some information about this system with you. It's a tray of red wiggler worms, over 250 days of age now, 253 days since it's been in service. And I think last time we might have gone 12 days between check-ins, but I've been trying to get to all of my systems before a little getaway. And although it's only been 8 days since we last checked in on this bin of worms where we've been only feeding non-frozen foods for some time now, I figured let me just come back in here, give them another feeding, because it might be a couple weeks, possibly a few weeks before I get back into here to check on these little guys. So what makes this system a little bit different than all the others is that of all the 21 feedings that the system's received over its lifetime, the last 18 of those 21 feedings have been non-frozen stuff, which is a little deviation from what I normally do in my systems. I normally freeze most of the stuff that the worms get. And I guess the other little novelty item about this system, which we spent a little time on last week, or 8 days ago, is the fact that there's a cork in here. And we did examine the cork. We actually took it out and we sprayed it down and we gave it a good rinse, so we'll probably bump into it this time. For a while there we had trouble locating the cork, so we did position it down the middle, right where the feedings have been getting placed. So that coffee filter I took off that was laying right here is what I refer to as my feeding zone indicator, showing us where we last fed the system. And I can already see some of what they got last time. It seems like whatever it is that's attempting to eat the stuff has attempted to do so by breaking through the outer husk or whatever of these peas. And I mean, if that's representative of what we're going to find in here, that means there's probably going to be a good many leftovers remaining from that last feeding in here. So it seems like they've made their way through some of them. Here's one that they've not yet managed to break through. So there's definitely leftovers in here. It would kind of make you question as to whether or not giving them more food today would make good sense. I mean, if it is going to be, as I suspect, over 2 weeks before the next time we get in here, it probably does make good sense just to throw a little bit of more food in here for good measure, a little extra bedding, and then I don't have to worry about these little guys. I'm assuming that by the time we get back in here a few weeks from now, at least 2 weeks I'm guessing, all this sort of stuff will be gone. But after 8 days, it's not too surprising that we're still seeing some leftovers here. I'm also kind of questioning whether the moisture levels are adequate in here, you know. Sometimes if you got to go all the way to the bottom before you start hitting large quantities of worms, it could mean that the material is just a little bit too dry for them. So I mean, that's a nice segue into the way I prepared the foods for these little guys today. What I wanted to give them was cranberry, but the cranberry is just one of those things that I have found to take forever in the worm bins. So I wanted to make sure that the stuff isn't going to sit here perpetually forever. So I put it in the little mini blender here, and I was going to deliver it to the worms in a ground up state, kind of in a fluid form. And then it should be visible right here in the, I don't know, maybe I've already zoomed in, but I've got my water bottle here too that I can spray the system down with. I'm also questioning whether it might be a good idea to also protect the system from further drying with maybe some other more robust cover, a little bit more than just the sheet of newspaper with which we're covering up here. I mean, even these little bits of torn up newspaper that I'm encountering were sort of recycled during the last feeding. We just put them right back down into the feeding area to let them continue, because they had actually been applied as the supplemental bedding to accompany the feeding 2 check-ins ago, which was 20 days ago at this point. So I am starting to wonder if a little moisture boost wouldn't hurt this system, especially since the bedding that I plan to use is just a few dry napkins. A lot of times the bedding I use is a moistened prepared bedding, but the bedding we're using today is dry. So yeah, I'm torn, you know. Do I just give the whole system a nice dampening and then not worry too much about it? Or do I cover up with plastic? It does seem to me like the worms being as low as they are down within the system, and not only that, but just the size of the worms. When they start looking a little bit scrawny like that to me, I don't think it's an indication of them being hungry or not well fed or something like that. To me, it seems like they might be running a little bit low on moisture. So it does seem to me like dampening would be a really nice thing to include with today's feeding. You know, especially if we look out here, I'm sure we're going to see more of the same material that really nicely flows, which is great if we wanted to screen the stuff or something. But look, there's no worms in this stuff. That to me means exceedingly dry, which means we've got to do something about it. So let's just proceed to giving them their meal, and then I can sort of get the spray bottle out, and we'll just give the entire system a nice dampening. And at the same time, we'll have a chance to sort of stir through the whole bin. And I think by taking those measures, we should be okay with the existing covers, hopefully. Because I mean, it's not detrimental, it's not dangerous. The worms are skinny, but they're still lively. They seem healthy. But I think moisture is something that they're definitely going to appreciate. So a liquid, or I don't even know liquid, it's kind of almost paste at this point. That's the other reason I got my squirt bottle, was because I wanted to use that to empty the little blender jar so that none of that pulverized cranberry ends up going down the sink. I'd rather have it go right into the worm bin. So let's proceed with giving them their fill. Besides the ground up cranberry, I've also got a half a loaf of bread. Well, not a loaf, it's a roll. It's a pretty good size roll, but a half of one, which was completely dried out, and it's been soaking in water for about a half hour now, and as far as I could tell, it's almost completely soaked through at this point. It was hard as a rock, and when I checked it not too long ago, it was starting to soften up nicely, but it felt like maybe in the middle there was still a little dry section. So I suspect that at this point it should be almost ready to go. So let's save this last napkin so we can sort of layer in their feeding. I figured perhaps we would start here with this. Oh, we've also got some fluid here, right? A little bit of this extra water that was used to hydrate this piece of dry bread, and it does feel to me like it has actually softened up at this point. Oh, there's a little tiny section of it right here that still feels hard, but it's tiny, and it's surrounded by damp stuff, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. It'll be moist in no time. So let's see, since I want to handle my I want to handle this thing a little bit. I might need both hands. I don't want to make it all gross. So let's drop in this feeding. This is definitely different from what you normally see me feeding around here. I normally don't go to the trouble of pulverizing the foods that the worms are being fed. But with cranberry, you know, I've experienced cranberry in the worm bin in the past, and I've noticed how this stuff can just linger forever and ever. And I'm not alone. I've seen other people on other worm channels feeding cranberry with the same results. So I thought that if I were to pulverize the stuff before dropping it in, it would have a much greater chance of being consumed by the worms. So we've created a real wet mess down here, which I suspect that the worms are really going to appreciate. And you know what? Even though none of the stuff that we're giving them here appears like it would require grit to be effectively digested by the wormies, I'm giving them some anyway. And now, this seems like a pretty fitting cover here because it'll start sopping up some of that lovely fruit paste. Almost like a jelly that we dropped in here. Oh yeah, let's not forget we've got a whole collection of leftovers to return to the feeding zone too. So I got a feeling that this is going to be a really popular feeding. The worms are probably going to really appreciate it. Not just because of the easy to eat foods, but also because of what comes next, which is a good bit of moisture that I'd like to apply. And I guess a good way to do that would be to simply stir it all in. And this thing has got a pretty good bit of pressure, so it's dispensing fluid quite quickly. So the material in here is going to definitely be well hydrated. And we'll definitely just come back on with the newspaper covering, which will allow for a little bit of the moisture to escape. But it's been so humid lately, you know, it's probably not in danger of drying out. I mean, considering the way it is right now, it is already perhaps a bit more dry than it should be. So some of the folks out there that sometimes comment on the dryness of my systems are probably very pleased to see me doing what I'm doing here. So let's just return all of this stuff that's adhering to my glove back down into the worm bin, or as much of it as we can, resulting in even a little bit more bonus moisture for these little guys, which I have a funny feeling they're going to really enjoy. Kind of makes me wish we were coming back in here sometime sooner, because it does almost seem like if we were to come back perhaps in another 7 or 10 days, we would find ourselves with a whole bunch of little wormies with big smiles on their faces. Because I've got a feeling that they're going to really like what we just did here for them. Nice dampening of the material for them, which is something that they're probably going to really appreciate. So, I think that's it now for our 22nd feeding of this 253-day-old red wiggler worm bin. I mean, all of my systems that are older than this system here have already either been switched over to foraging, or in a way they are effectively migrating to exit their castings. So I believe that in this system too, we'll probably be switching to a diet of very easy to eat, you know, foods, small particle foods, or blended foods, or other sorts of things that are going to leave no residue to segue nicely into a harvest one of these days. But for now, this is just another active worm bin getting fed, status quo, just like any other worm bin. But soon I think it will be time to start driving them towards the finish line. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.